over in Brussels. I mean, I've got to say, I was watching this live today because the National Conservative Conference was taking place. Now, this conference, essentially, they had their venue cancelled twice, so they was now on their third venue attempt today. And long story short, the mayor of Brussels decided that he didn't want this to happen. He was essentially saying that it needed to be shut down for public safety. Nigel Farage was on the stage. It was gripping it. It was better than any drama I've watched recently, I can tell you that. You had the police at the door. It was really, really gripping stuff. Anyway, Nigel Farage, let's listen to what he had to say.
Well, they don't like alternative points of view. I mean, you know, I'm used to this. I mean, when I was an MEP here in my last few years, I was banned from restaurants, banned from pubs, even banned from coffee shops because I had a different point of view to that was prevailing and backed up by big money and big business here. But that was me on a private level. This is very much on a public stage. No alternative opinion allowed. This is the updated new form of communism. And you know what? If anything ever made me think that Brexit was the right thing to do, it's the events here in Brussels today.
The mayor of the city has just described, and he was saying, and I quote, "The far right is not welcome." Well, one of the other speakers there was Suella Braverman. Let's take a listen to her.
It's pretty astonishing, Nigel, isn't it? Thankfully, you and I got to make our speeches in favour of controlling our borders and protecting our communities amongst like-minded Democrats. Many of us there are democratically elected politicians. Many of us are leaders in our field, academics, thinkers, writers. And it's frankly staggering that the mayor of Brussels has deployed his thought police to cancel what is a peaceful event focused on how we can better represent the millions of people around the European continent.
Well, look, so Wes Streeting, he had this to say earlier. Listen.
Right, Honourable Member for Fareham, who couldn't be here today with us, Mr Deputy Speaker, because she's currently in Brussels, surrounded by the police who are trying to shut down the event she's attending with some far-right fanatics with whom she has much in common.
Extraordinary, really, and I didn't know I was going to say this until I saw that clip of Wes Streeting. Labour joking about this really sends a shiver down the spine. Is this what we are to expect if we get a Labour government? Free speech just for those people with whom you agree? Because that is no free speech at all. Belief in a free society and a free speech means standing up for the rights of people you despise. Now, I dare say, I hope that they've got a more convivial relationship than that. I hope that they're parliamentary sparring partners, but Wes Streeting doesn't despise Suella Braverman. But even if he does, he ought not seek to ban her views or laugh at those who do. I dare say the Mayor of Brussels has given this conference far more attention than it would ever otherwise have received, and it's probably backfired on him to an extent. But I would say to the Mayor of Brussels, you know, if you disagree with people, then feel free to say why you disagree with them. Feel free to argue with them, or even disparage and mock them, but don't seek to ban them.
I think it's actually quite chilling, James, that because you can politically disagree with someone, you wheel out this label, this far-right label that just gets wheeled out so often now. It's just to me, it's almost meaningless now because it's just used like confetti, basically to mean I disagree with you. But this notion that you can have the police literally chomping at the bit at the door, then they went in, they gave them 15 minutes basically to read these documents, that agree to close down the conference and so on. I find it quite chilling. What do you think?
Well, you're right to find it chilling. The police shouldn't be going around in any country shutting down political meetings, regardless of how distasteful you find them. And there will be a lot said at the NatCon conference that will be extremely distasteful, that should be attacked, as there was when it was held in London, as it is when it is held in the US. There's much to disagree about it. But they should be allowed to go and say it so that it can be disagreed with. And this is a worrying trend. Earlier in your presentation, you were suggesting it's something that is only done to the right, and I don't think that's the case at all. For example, just a few days ago, there was a conference in Berlin, the Palestine conference, which was shut down by 2,000 police officers who prevented entering in British-Palestinian Dr. Hassan Abu Sitta, who was meant to give testimony about what was happening in hospitals in Palestine, and that was shut down. The live feed was shut off, and the people who were participating, including Yanis Varoufakis, the former Greek finance minister, is banned from entry to Germany and banned from even participating in Zooms that could have Germans on them. And I think this is a very worrying trajectory that we should all stand against.
I'll give you the ultimate irony, which is that this mayor of Brussels, not some past predecessor, this mayor of Brussels, has appeared on a stage with the mayor of Tehran, who is sanctioned by the EU. And his defence, when challenged about that, was just appearing on a panel with somebody doesn't mean you agree with them. Well, quite! You know, hosting people in a city and allowing them to have public discourse doesn't mean you agree with them. Of course, we've all immediately become experts on the Belgian constitution, haven't we? And the Belgian constitution guarantees freedom of speech and assembly. Well, that wasn't much in evidence here, and I look forward to the Brussels government, the Belgian government, saying this mayor is completely off base. And I'll just give you one more point, because if in a parallel world I were the mayor of London and James had some meeting with his far-left mates, I wouldn't dream of tasking the police with shutting them down. And if I did, I hope the police would refuse my unlawful order, because this is wholly against free speech. And moreover, from the so-called capital of the European Union, the next time the EU tries to say Putin or Orban or Trump has done something authoritarian and overreached their powers, something they don't like, those authoritarian right-wingers will say, why shouldn't I? Because that's what happens in the heart of your beloved EU. And you know what? They'll be right.
Well, the Prime Minister, actually, of Belgium, he has written on Twitter, X, and said what happened at the Claridge today, so that's the venue that they was hosting that at, it's unacceptable, basically. He goes on about municipal autonomy is a cornerstone of our democracy, but can never ever rule the Belgian constitution, guaranteeing the freedom of speech and peaceful assembly since 1830. Banning political meetings is unconstitutional. Full stop.
Good for the Prime Minister of Belgium, which is, of course, something I say all the time.
What about this weird notion, this weird overuse of the phrase far right? Because I feel that this just gets wheeled out all the time, and basically what it means is people I just disagree with.
I don't think it does mean that. Of course, any term can be used sloppily, far left or hard left or far right or so on. They can be used sloppily. I do think that I haven't looked at the full guest list and everything that they have to say, but there have been people that are further to the right than the hard right who have participated in these events. But, I mean, these are analytical terms. They're not just... and they should be used as such. So we shouldn't be afraid of calling people far right when they're far right, but it shouldn't be used in a way that...
I don't think anyone's afraid of calling anyone far right. People use it all the time, and they use it, if you ask me, as a way of shaming. So what they think is, oh, if I shout far right to them because essentially they want controlled immigration, then they'll feel so ashamed that they'll all kind of wither and be silent. It's absolutely ridiculous. But then the other flip side... Alex, unless you want to respond on that far right
thing. I agree. I get called far right on the social media for expressing the kinds of views we're discussing tonight. I think all too often it does mean I disagree with you. But I get to disagree with you without having the burden of explaining why or why you're wrong. I just call you far right, and therefore I'm able to dismiss you.
But then the flip side of this is many people will also argue that the Conservatives, i.e. your party, they're not even Conservative anymore. So, for example, you've got this vote tonight on the tobacco and vapes bill. Many people would argue that true Conservatives would allow people to make choices that are perhaps bad for them. And why would you be busying yourselves with bills like that?
So, two things. First of all, of course, the Conservative Party is a broad church. It includes everyone from Suella Braverman, which you rightly described on the right, which is where I am, to all the way through to lefties who think in the Conservative sense, who think we should have remained in the European Union and so forth, although we have our own internal family disagreements from time to time. On the point you make about the smoking ban, I would just make the point that whilst the Prime Minister is seeking to introduce legislation which the Labour Party is now supporting and says we'll get over the line, I think they're probably right, he's doing so in a free vote. And I, as a candidate selected by the Conservative Party, regard that free vote as applying to candidates as well as members of Parliament.
Is it a good use of Conservative government time?
No, well, I was just going to make the point that I think it's completely wrong. You know, and I as someone who's been selected by my party, feel free to say that in the course of having a free vote about it. But I will just make the point too, and I don't know what James thinks about this, the last time restrictions on kind of personal choice issues like this went through the House of Commons, On the left, people like John Reid and Tessa Jowell and John Prescott voted against restricting people's ability to make these decisions for themselves. In part, they did it because the working man's freedom after a hard day to go out and have a pint or a smoke shouldn't be restricted. And in part, they did it because there was broad cross-party consensus on liberalism. Would that return?
Would it?
Will we ever be a more liberal?
Well, I suppose I meant would that we could have it back would be lovely, but will that return to the Labour Party? Because the strongest debate in this is within the Conservative Party. Some saying it's right, some saying it's wrong. The Labour Party is united in this kind of nanny state control freakery.
Do you agree with that?
I think that probably the Labour Party is just doing what it always does, which is agreeing with the government because it thinks that that's the best way to win the election.
You're a hard man to debate, James. When you say you say true things.
The answer is I hope so. I think that this is a stupid ban, and I do think that there's a long-standing tradition that is much more focused on freedom on the left, especially in the left of the Labour Party, that is not in favour of this sort of stuff at all, and has been against it for a long time.
Can I squeeze in one point, Michelle?
You may.
Which is, believing in liberty means nothing at all if you just defend things that everyone likes and are good for you. Sometimes liberty means defending things that you don't like, and the right of grown adults to decide things that are bad for them. And long may that remain so.
Kevin says Michelle Weststreeting should be forced to apologise for that comment he made in Parliament. I don't see that happening, do you? Andy says, Michelle, I don't personally believe that there is a left and a right narrative anymore. It's just a fight between two intolerant sides who both have the arrogance to be certain that they are right. The political debate has become too toxic to be healthy for democracy. He says, I hope that I'm wrong. Is he wrong, or do you agree with that? Has it all got too toxic? Are people too arrogant on either side of the debate? Give me your thoughts on that.